Hi, I'm Captain Larry Bell with Texas Fishing Tips. This is your weekly fishing report. Mustang Lake, all the area up here in Mustang Lake. And one thing that you need to be aware of, again, tides moving, big fallout, bring it back real hard. We're starting to push in and out with these big fronts we've had, and other big fronts pushed in this past weekend. This whole thing here, a lot of this area can be really skinny, really shallow, so it's really important to pay attention to those tides if you're going to run up in here into Mustang Lake and fish it. That said, now, all this area up in here has got great mud in it. It's got scattered shell that's in there. There's been a decent amount of bait that's working in it. Again, this time of year, you're not going to have a tremendous amount of bait in the system. As we begin a warming trend, once we get past this front, it looks like we're going to have a nice little warming trend here, so that's really going to kind of speed things up a little bit. And try to push these fish into some time of a springtime pattern. We'll see how long that holds, and just something to be aware of and to pay attention to. But continue to fish your shell, continue to fish your mud mainly, because again, the mud holds heat, the sand doesn't, so we're not quite there just yet consistently. But all this area up in here, all the way to the back, if you can get back in here, I suggest you wade all this area here. It's nice. It's, ankle-deep mud at best. You may get just a little bit squishier stuff here and there, but it's not unmanageable at any means. So down south, Supermodel has been good. The regular version's been good. Burner Shad's been best in any of the flavors that you want. Just pay attention what your watercolor is and adjust accordingly. It's kind of a fluid situation at the time, so there's lots of water that's moving in and moving out, so it changes that water clarity as much as it can with that water movement. Plus, you got the barges that come through there as well, so that affects that, and you got some water movement from that as well. So remember all that kind of stuff there, and then make sure you throw in your corky. The soft dines have been good. Again, I primarily stick to the mullet flavor with the black back, silver sides to it. That's the regular size mirror dines. They've been working really well. A top water bait occasionally has been okay. You're getting just a little bit of action off it, but not a tremendous amount. If you want to throw that just to see, to kind of explore with it, you can. That's not a bad idea. The Corky Devil has been pretty good as well. But the main ones there, and also the shrimp, Marker 54 jerk shrimp has been pretty good up in this area as well. Working all this back shoreline, work out in the middle, especially when you got that tide that drops out on you. Work out in the middle of this thing. It gets a little soft out there, but again, it's very manageable. Lots of scattered shell that's over that. It's a little bit of grass here and there. Look for some bait working. Again, if you don't have bait that you see flipping, look to see if you have any pelicans diving or any of the ospreys that's hovering and looking for fish. Because if you see an osprey hanging out in a particular area, then more than likely they're looking at some type of bait. So that just lets you know that there is bait that's present in the area, and you can continue on to fish this area. Again, work this area around and down, kind of work out toward the mouth of the ICW out there. You can even go on the outside of it. Just be aware of where your boat's anchored up, because when these barges come by, they can suck a lot of water out of there. So just make sure it's secured, and make sure yourself is in a safe position that you can pay attention to where these barges are coming from and work all these areas in here. Looking for your fish. Again, incorporate your majors and minors during these time frames to help you out with that bite process, and you'll locate your fish. Sundown Bay, whole back shoreline. Man, get out of your boat, find your spot that you want to work this area, and just get out and wade the whole back shoreline. You got 4 back lake mouths that dump out into south or to Sundown here. And you can work all these mouths. You can work up in the mouths a little bit. Be careful when you work up into those, because they get really soft in some of those spots. So you may want to just see if you got bait working up in those areas and cast to them. Put on maybe just a tad bit heavier bait like the Paul Brown Original. You can get a little extra distance with those. Pay attention to what's going on with your tides, again, in this area here, because when these tides really drop out, sundown gets really skinny on you. So if you don't have that skinny water boat that you can get up here on these back shorelines, working these areas, then you're going to have just a little bit of trouble getting in and getting out. It'll be lots of mud, and you don't want to mess with that. So again, pay attention to your tides up in this area here. Work the edge of the ICW. You got some nice shell that's out there. Work around that. It's a great point of emphasis when you're working there. Make sure that you've got some bait working in the area. Again, the ospreys, pelicans are great indicators for you to let you know if there is any bait that's working up in here. Another thing, too, that you can pay attention to, and you'll know pretty quick, is if that tide has dropped out of there somewhat, that water gets really clear up in here. So one thing that you really need to throw is a translucent bait. Like the Down South Dirty Tequila is a really great bait to throw up in this area here. Another one is the Mirror Lure Little John's Kitchen Sink. Golden Red Glitter is another great bait that you can throw in that clear water. Great baits to throw up in here. They got scent infused into them, so they can be really effective for you up in this area here. Again, these back shoreline here, off-colored water, down south lures have been great for me. Again, the Magic Grass, Chicken of the Sea are my two favorites, so I always throw those a lot. Got great response with those. Good productive bait. Another bait that he's come out with is Vapor. It's a black-based bait, colored bait with lots of different flavors and flecks into it. It's been out for a little bit, but it's a really great bait for this type of water as well. Continue to push down this way. The backside of the little island here that works against the ICW, work the backside of it. There's been some decent box trout that's been in this areas here. Again, the redfish have been primarily the main target for what I've been doing. Come across a couple of black drum here and there ever so often, especially on that back shoreline here as you work down into the corner, all that area there. Again, one of the things that helps you out here is if you see the barges that come through there, they create a lot of current up in these things, so that can create a bite for you if you don't have anything that's really going for you. You're past a major or a minor and you don't have a tremendous amount of wind, or you maybe have just enough. One of those barges come through, it sucks some of that water out of there, and it helps create that bite. So keep that in mind, especially if you're paying attention to that and you're working that. Work all the way down to the little mouth that goes, little creek that runs back around and dumps back out in the ICW. You can get up into that a little ways. Again, that gets a little soft as well. If you have enough water, get on your trolling motor and work down that creek. There's enough room for you to do it. Again, it's all tide predicated, so you got to make sure that you got enough water to do all that stuff. If not, you're just going to be throwing into mud, so that's not going to be what you really want. Up here in this little corner with the other back lake that slides up into there, again, if you got enough water to get up, slide up into some of those back lakes there and look and see if you see any bait that's working in there. See if you see pushes, topwater baits. You can see if you can get some type of response with it, just to kind of look and see if there are any redfish have pushed up in there. But this area back in here has been holding some redfish, that is, and a few black drum and scattered trout as well. One other thing, too, on the trout, again, on the 16th of this month, that new regulation goes into effect, so make sure you pay attention to that. It's a 17 to 23, no overs, 3 fish only. And if you don't need to keep those, just catch and release them. Have a good time with them and focus on your redfish and black drum. But that said, all this area up in here has been holding some decent fish. Again, your water has to be where it needs to be for these fish to push up into here. If it's too low, then move on past it. But outside of that, it's been pretty productive. Down here in Spalding, one of my favorite areas to fish, whether you got a low tide, high tide, whatever, it's just a great location to fish, man. You got fish that constantly move in and out of here. Some days are obviously better than others, but for the most part, when you come down in here to Spalding, you've got multiple drains that you can work, whether either out in front of them, up in the drains, to the back lakes, whatever. It's just great location. When you got bait that's working up in here and you got a little tidal movement, either wind-driven or tidal-driven, either one, man, it can be really good. If you be patient with it, some days it'll just pop off and be great for you right off the bat. Other days you may have to grind on it. But if you stay with it and stick in there, you will locate fish. All that said, again, we've had fluctuating tides. We've got these fronts that push in here, push waters out, and then it starts coming back in. We're fixing to head toward a full moon. We're transitioning toward that now. We're not far away from it. Later in the week that we will be in a full moon, probably toward the end of this upcoming weekend. So make sure that you adjust your baits. Make sure you downsize, because remember, fish are predominantly night feeders. So these fish are going to be eating most of the night long underneath that big old full moon, especially if we've got some clear skies. That's when they're going to be hanging out doing their damage. So your primary time that you really want to focus on is going to be early morning when that moon's setting, a moonset minor. until about mid-morning, say 10, 11 o'clock, and then maybe push off the water if you have the opportunity to do this, and then get back on the water probably 2 hours, maybe 3 hours before that moon's going to start to rise. And those are going to be your primary times that you're really going to want to target and want to fish during those time frames. So make sure that you stack a lot of good stuff in your favor. Bait working in the area, incoming or outgoing tide. Obviously, you're going to have a minor that's going to be taking place. It'll be a moonrise minor, and maybe possibly a little bit of wind pushing some bait around for you. So those are all great things that you want to have in your favor, and some structure. And there's good structure up here. You got scattered shell, you got clump shell, you got some scattered grass that's in these. You got some deeper guts in the mouths, and as they push back in these little cuts that go back to the back lakes. If the tides are right, work your way back to the back lakes. Get back in there and wade those back lakes. Those fish will push back in, and that water temperature is going to be warm, especially throughout the process of the day. The sun's going to warm that water up because it's primarily mud and grass that are back in those lakes. So that's going to be a lot warmer. Again, shallow water heats up and cools off faster than deeper water. So later in the day, that's going to be a primary spot that you're going to want to maybe take a look at if you're able to get back into that. There have been some redfish that's pushed in and out of these things, been put back on the back lakes, they've been in the guts, they've been out in the mouths. You just have to work and look and find and locate, and that's part of the fishing process. But as long as you're putting yourself in these type of situations, in these areas, you're going to be successful. You know, throw something that's got a little bit of color to it, depending on what the water clarity is. You know, a darker bait, the down south magic grass is my number one go-to. I always throw that no matter what. A chicken of the sea, the mirror lure Little Johns for just a little bit more movement, a little bit smaller bait. So if you're going to throw the down south, I would suggest throwing the burner shad or maybe the regular version, and then the mirror lure Little Johns or your next size that you would want to throw to. Got a lot of action on those. The Mirrodine soft dines, a little bit smaller version, bigger, a little bit fatter profile, but it's a shorter bait. Got a little rattle to it. So those are all great choices that if you would throw those particular things. The jerk shrimp, marker 54, if you want to put it underneath a popping cork and yank away on that thing, and if that water's gotten dirty on you, that's another great bait to throw. Or you can free line it and work all that bait up in this shell that's up in here, work it in those grass, work it in those guts. The redfish have been in and out of here. Black drum scattered amongst in here, pulled out a couple of flounder here and there as well. So those are all coming out of these guts. So when you're looking forward to getting up into this area of Spalding, make sure you make all those areas, your guts, your mouth drains out in front of it, depending on water level, looking for your bait, incorporating that major or the minor, which is going to be that full moon that's coming. So make sure you take care of all those things, look at those things there, and you'll locate fish. Thanks for watching. I'm Captain Larry Bell.